The Big Breakfast, Jono and Nats. Now, we rarely have a guest that requires no introduction. This guy doesn't need anything said about him except for the fact that he's in Abu Dhabi this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Now, the Saturday gig, pretty much close to sold out. The Sunday gig, you can still get tickets for that. Etihad Arena. Hans Zimmer in the studio with us live. Hans, how are you?
I'm overwhelmed by your introduction. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you so very much for coming into the studio to chat to us.
No introduction part. I mean, that really threw me. So I would like to go, hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hans Zimmer, and I write film scores. And sometimes I step out of my dark and windowless room and go into huge, big, dark and windowless rooms called arenas. And I think that's what I'm doing here. You know,
that is a fitting introduction as well. But you are back here in the UAE again, which means the crowds love you. Every time you've performed over here, the crowds have absolutely, and so much so that you're back again, almost sold out yet again. People love going to see you perform live.
You know, it's mutual. It's a mutual feeling of. I loved coming here. I loved bringing something to this truly remarkable place that is constantly changing, which is pretty much what I do. I'm constantly changing things. You know, I'm constantly trying to reinvent the way we make music, and I'm nearly over the film music thing in a funny way. I mean, I still have Dune to do, and in fact, I'm meeting with Denis Villeneuve tomorrow because he's just about to go into the desert and get really, really, really warm. But we have one more film to do. But I mean, the touring really, the idea of having a direct communication, having a direct. I don't know how to say
connection,
it.
I guess, with the crowd.
It's more than that. It's that crazy thing where you feel truly adored and you really truly adore them. And while you're on stage, you're getting all this energy from all these people. And the moment you leave the stage, it's like somebody hit you with a hammer over the head.
Yeah, because the energy must be so palpable. But how do you go from creating a film score, right, to then translating that to something that is going to fit with an orchestra and filling arenas packed to the brim, to the roof, full of people?
Two answers. When I start writing a film score, what I do is I write my version of what I think the film is, and it becomes a sort of 20-minute, 30-minute ideas of different themes and stuff like this. You know, I do it like a diary, so I don't go back and revise. So Sometimes I go back and listen and go, oh, that's quite interesting. I shouldn't have thrown that out, you know. Mm-hmm. I've been to recording studios once or twice in my life.
Only once or twice.
Right.
Only once or twice.
Actually, I lived there, right? So I lived there until my friends, and I have to name drop here, Pharrell Williams and Johnny Marr.
Wow.
Yeah. They sat me down on my couch a little too close, you know, so I couldn't get up. And they started saying, you know, there is a time when you have to start looking the audience in the eye. You can't hide behind a screen for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. You have to do things in real time. And I was going, oh, no, I can't do that. I have terrible stage fright. And they're going, yeah, we all have stage fright, okay? So they very much, I mean, they were there in the first few shows, just making sure, you know, I wasn't going to faint. I wasn't going to, kill myself.
Because stage fright is, and I think once you lose that stage fright, that's when you need to step back from being on stage, because that's something that I think every performer needs to experience to have that spark, that adrenaline, that energy to get out there and do a good show.
Well, I'll tell you honestly, the first show was great. And I thought, that's the end of stage fright. The next day, I wake up in total panic. And I just went, well, that's how I am built. You know, I'm just going to have that for the rest of my life.
And at this stage of your career, does it still happen? Do you get the palpitations and the sweaty palms just for a few seconds, like the exhilaration?
What do you mean
of it?
few seconds? It can last through the whole first set, you know. It's like, oops, you know, these guitar strings felt a lot more solid before my fingers got all slippery.
It's because you make it look so effortless. And you mentioned Dune just a few minutes ago. And for Dune, you built entirely new instruments. Right. And can you tell us about one of the most unusual instruments that you've used or created for a film?
Well, yeah, I mean, Dune is absolutely the one. I mean, because when I was a teenager and I went to see Star Wars, and I love Star Wars and I love John Williams. So I everything I say should be said in the context of that I have nothing but pure love for these people. But precocious teenagers goes to the theater and it says, in a galaxy far, far from here, in the future. And you hear a sort of a European orchestra yodeling away in the background. And you go, what, really? In the future? We haven't even managed to,
New instruments are not a thing.
Yeah, we haven't managed to, pack the violins in and stuff like this. So I had a friend called Chaz, who unfortunately died during the second movie from cancer, but he put everything into... okay, just quickly, he was a musician, but he was a welder as well, and he had some unholy alliance with Boeing, whereby he could get all those metals that we've never heard of.
Oh wow, that they use in aircraft and on spaceflight, yeah.
So we couldn't quite pronounce them, and his whole house was a resonating chamber. So if you wanted to record his instruments, you had to actually go there because the house was part of the instrument.
Amazing.
Wow. And yeah, he was mad as a hatter.
Yeah, well, I mean, to making it, you are, as you say, you're making something for the future. But let's go back a bit to the past, because, and you mentioned there, friends with Pharrell Williams. That wasn't always the case for Hans Zimmer, and there was a start off to your career, I guess, between My Beautiful Laundrette and Rain Man, where you weren't sure how this was going to go with regards to the music. You weren't sure if this was going to be the career path or not. So we're talking the mid '80s.
No, I was sure. I was a little too sure, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I was precocious, and to make it quick, I mean, the first person who really took notice of me was George Martin, who had produced the Beatles, and that wasn't a bad mentor to have. And then Stanley Myers, who had written the music for The Deer Hunter and wrote that beautiful guitar piece, wasn't a bad mentor to have. Actually, with Stanley, it was slightly different because he had bought himself one of those amazing Italian espresso machines with loads of buttons. He didn't know how to use it. So the deal was I was going to go and figure out the espresso machine, and he was going to teach me how the orchestra worked. So...
Wow. That's a good deal.
That's a good,
that was a good deal.
You both got a good deal there.
Yeah. And then friends of ours were, including some young actor that nobody had heard of called Daniel Day-Lewis, we all decided we were going to go and make this film, My Beautiful Laundrette. And we did, we did. We had no money. We shot it in 16 mil. We didn't quite know what we were doing, but that just sort of helped things, And it was shown at the Edinburgh Festival as a television thing. And all the critics went, no, you guys, this is wrong.
Yeah,
this
was
is
a bigger
proper
movie.
So it went from there, and then the next thing, and I'm not trying to give you my whole life story, but I will give you this.
I hope you're going to get to the part that I'm going to ask you the next question about. But let's see. I don't know if the knock on your door is the next part you're going to tell us about.
On the door is my next thing. So I had a little studio down the back alley in deepest, darkest, criminal-ridden Fulham, and one night, about 11 o'clock, somebody's knocking on the door. We didn't have a doorbell. Somebody's knocking on the door, and I open the door, and it's a man standing out there, and he's going, my name is Barry Levinson. I'm a Hollywood director. And I said, yeah, you and my mum both, which is sort of a normal reaction to have at 11 o'clock. But then I looked behind him, and there were these, they used to have these crazy Daimler limousines in London. I think there are no more. They were just too large, and only famous people were driven in them, or royalty. So I'm thinking, well, maybe he is. Maybe he's not lying. So I said, well, why don't you come in? And he came in and he said, yes, his wife, Diana, and I'm very precise about naming her, had seen a little movie I had done that nobody else had seen called A World Apart. And she loved the music, and she loved it so much that rather than going home and saying, hey, Barry, this would be great for your next movie, Rain Man, she actually went out to the record shop and bought him the CD.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
So, and he thought I knew everything about Hollywood and all that stuff. and I'd never been there. And he asked me very politely if I would consider doing his movie, or if I would consider coming to Hollywood. To which, of course, I went, yes, please, when do I leave? And that was really it. I did Rain Man. I did Rain Man. I did my first Hollywood movie, got nominated for an Oscar. And then they have these, 2 weeks before the Oscars, they have these lunches and dinners and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was like a kid, I didn't want to miss anything, you know. I met Ridley Scott and I got Black Rain. I met Bruce Beresford and got Driving Miss Daisy. I met Tony Scott, Ridley's brother, and got Days of Thunder. I met Jerry Bruckheimer, and
It
I
opened all
met them
these
all.
doors.
So all within 1 week, my diary was full.
So you've worked with, I mean, the who's who of the directing world, right? Is there a director out there or an artist that you haven't worked with yet that you think, yeah, I'd love to do something with that person?
You know, funny enough, it doesn't go like that. It goes more like somebody comes and brings me an interesting story.
Okay.
And I usually don't read the script. What I do is we go out for dinner, and I say to him, "Tell me the story."
Mm-hmm.
And we have a nice bottle of wine, and over the evening he tells me the story, because I hear what is important to him as opposed to what is important to the writer, and so we're already a team.
You're
at
already
that point.
collaborating.
Yeah, we're already collaborating, you know, and yeah, it goes a bit left and right, and you know, I'm going like, but that's a stupid idea. What if we did this and that and that and the other? You know, things get rewritten. I mean, Chris Nolan made me write. He saw me at a party, and I'm so not the party animal, and he's so not the party animal. So we were squished into a corner, ignoring everyone, like just talking about films and things we loved. And Chris stopped in the middle of it and said, if I were to send you a letter which doesn't describe the movie, but is basically a fable, would you give me 1 day and write whatever comes to you? And so I did that on a Sunday, and I finished about 10 o'clock at night. I phoned his house. His wife, Emma, answered. And I said, I'm done. Do you want me to send it over? And she goes, oh, Chris has been curiously antsy all day. Do you mind if he comes over to the studio? So he comes over, sits on my couch, and I'm going, okay, let me play you this. It's tiny. It's really fragile. It's really my love letter to my son. And he goes, okay, go and play it. And I play it, and I turn around and say, what do you think? And he sort of throws his arms up and goes, well, I suppose I better make the movie now.
Wow. So the music came before the movie in that instance?
And
wow.
I think it came a little bit before the writing was finished as well.
Wow.
And that was Interstellar.
That is such a beautiful story.
Because sometimes you take on a project and you think, this might not be the project that I should be doing. And I know the same is true of Lion King.
I've done a few.
There's been a few, but there's one that you were vocal about, which was Lion King, where you thought, I can't do Disney princes and princesses. And that movie for you...
I was so scathing. Disney kitsch, Disney this, blah. I don't want to do a Disney princess movie. I don't want, here's the thing. I loathe musicals. I will not do a musical. And they're going, we guarantee you no musical. And then they basically let me do whatever I wanted to do. And in the middle of the film, or at the end of the first third, the father dies. And my father died when I was 6 years old. And kids are really quite brilliant at packing trauma away. They don't, everybody says he's over it now, he's handled it. They don't handle it. They just figure out how to hide it. Yeah. How to hide it from themselves, how to hide it from the world, And suddenly I'm sitting in front of this cartoon, which I was doing for my 6-year-old daughter because I wanted to show off, and I had never been able to take it.
Yeah, she'd never been to a premiere with you before that.
And it's deeply moving, for me, with the father dying, followed by fart jokes, of course, because it's a Disney movie, but still, it gave me an opportunity to say goodbye to my father, and I basically wrote it as a requiem.
Like as a love letter to him.
More than that, it was a love letter to myself as well.
Yeah.
All the pain, all the bullying, all the, my daddy's bigger than your daddy. Well, you don't have a daddy, etc. All that cruelty you go through as a kid, which with me, I was an easy task. I got thrown off 8 schools and finally ended up in England.
Now look at you.
Yeah, I could get thrown out of 9 schools.
Maybe even a 10th.
I know. I'm in really good contact with my last headmaster, who wrote a letter once saying if he had anything to do with not squashing my creativity the way other schools would have done, he feels very proud of himself, which is really the truth. We kids know what we want to do, not necessarily exactly, but we know which direction we want to lean in. And then everybody look, it's like this. When I stand in front of the orchestra and I have a toothache, I just say to the orchestra, I got a bit of a toothache here on this side, just down there. And half the orchestra stands up and goes, we know how to help, because they all studied as dentists. Their parents made them have a real job.
Yeah.
And then if I have a legal problem, it's the other side. They're all lawyers. Sometimes I don't get somebody because he's in the middle of a murder case or something like that. But but they do have all. They have this other world, and I just didn't. I know this is a terrible thing to say, and please don't try this at home, children. I just said no to my mother. I just went, I'm going to be a musician. That's it.
And what about with your kids now? Are you telling them, because your daughter must be 38, 39 now? 36. So are you telling them, or did you tell them back in the day, this is what you need to do to have a backup job, but then if you want to do something creative, then go for it?
I just watched her, how she was struggling with what she wanted to do, and now she's got something really cool going on. She's designing these really... She's very, very pale and very, very skinny. And there's nothing that looks really pale for really skinny and long-legged people in the swimsuit market. So she's designed all these really elegant things.
Bespoke,
which she's just on Monday, she's going to go to New York to meet with, some shops and stuff.
So you let them have the creative outlet, do whatever you think is the right career path for you.
Absolutely. Well, Annabelle, my youngest daughter, I have twins. The son in the middle, when he was 16, because of Interstellar, we had a few connections. He started interning at NASA.
Wow.
And after 3 weeks, that was over, and I get a phone call from NASA saying, can they keep him for a little longer? And I said, what's he doing? and they said, well, we'd rather not say. And he came home that night, and I said, what are you doing? And he said, Dad, I'd rather not say. And then he would get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and do his NASA stuff while going to school, finish school. NASA said, okay, full-time job now. And he goes, I want to go to university.
Wow, okay.
And so they held the job for him for 4 years.
Whoa.
So he's there now.
That's incredible.
So none of them do music.
Right, but they do what they wanted to do, which is what's important to you, to not stifle creativity.
And weirdly, Drake, the NASA guy,
Yeah.
He's constantly watching what I'm doing, and he's constantly going, Dad, you're a really good mathematician. You just don't know the language, because he observes the similarities between music and mathematics. And he gets it. He sees what I'm doing.
I have a friend who says that maths is like a language that you speak fluently once you get it, once it clicks.
Yeah, absolutely. He speaks it fluently. Can you go back a few sentences?
Yeah.
So, you've inspired your kids to follow their path, right? And to
Of
lean
course.
into whatever it is that makes them tick or gives them a sense of purpose. With young musicians starting out in the film industry, what advice would you give them if they're starting out with regards to film music? What piece of advice would you give them?
Really, honestly, don't do what I did, because unless you're incredibly lucky, you will never sleep. You will only eat baked beans. The bank manager will be on your back about the overdraft. You never discussed with him, and you have to be unbelievably lucky to be noticed. You have to write something which is indisputably brilliant, and cannot be hidden. And somebody sees it and somebody hears it and they go, I have a
So
job
all the
for you.
pieces of the puzzle have to fall into place.
Absolutely.
You've famously before said as well you work a 9 to 5, but it's 9 at night till 5 in the morning,
Yeah.
which is, I could totally get behind that. So you're more creative at night. So I guess this time of the day, not as creative as you would be any other time of the day. You're a night owl.
Yes, because the nights are silent and the only thing I hear is what I want to hear.
Right, it blocks
which is
out all the
my
noise.
little notes, you
Yeah.
know. And it's funny because I got a soundproof studio and still you feel the world outside.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the mornings I think are dreadful because people get up and the first thing they do, they open their email, which is full of, you know, we have a problem here, but you haven't paid that bill. So they're incredibly grumpy and not very happy until about lunchtime. And after lunchtime, they turn to some kind of human being.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have that relationship.
I love that idea. I think I wish we could adopt that policy. Had we not been working a breakfast shift, we would adopt that policy as well. I think both.
Did
Well,
you do
I-
a breakfast shift?
Yeah,
though?
Yeah.
we do the breakfast show, and we wake up at about 4:15, 4:30 every single morning. But
You should phone me. I'm up.
yeah.
Still.
I know. I haven't even taken a nap today. I don't even know what I'm functioning on. But I've made it a point recently to just turn off the phone notifications. I wake up, I listen to an audiobook, and that's how I start my day, with some stretching, and
Right.
I take some time before I allow the noise of the world to reach
You
me.
must,
Yeah.
because the noise of the world is just hideous, and getting worse somehow. You know, and the thing that doing these tours, which I didn't want to do, and they really had to kick me into doing these tours, I suddenly found this other calling somehow. It's just delicious to look people in the eye and to make people happy, and we do quite a show, and Steve, who's sitting over there, is trying to sort of corral it in a bit as far as it goes financially, but I have to tell you, he's doing a terrible job. You know,
But as long as you're having fun on this tour.
and because what I want to do is I want to give people an experience they couldn't have anywhere else.
And that's from anyone who's been to your show, they'll be aware that it's one of those immersive experiences where the entire world, the noise of the world outside means nothing, and you're just immersed in the music for
Right.
the entirety of the show.
And the world that you create.
Because it is your world. You step inside some little, and I reckon there's a lot more we could dig into, a molecule of the mind of Hans Zimmer, which for us today in the chat that we've had has been really insightful, and I really feel we could chat to you for the entire day.
The chat is not dissimilar because I never prepare anything that I'm going to say. I walk onto the stage, play the first piece, and then I go to the front where the microphone is, and underneath there's a piece of paper that says Abu Dhabi.
And that's it.
And I know where I am, so we go from there. And
Wow.
sometimes I get it wrong. Hello, Oslo and Stockholm. Yes. Not my fault.
Similar.
Somebody glued the wrong piece of paper down.
So very similar. But look, we're looking forward to seeing the show again. 2 shows, in fact, this weekend. I really wish we could have chatted to you for the entirety. We could do 4 hours on the radio with Hans Zimmer, and you're more than welcome anytime you're back in town again to please call in and have a conversation with us.
And seeing as you're a night owl,
Yeah.
our show is like prime time for you.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
like, that's
You're
when
still
you're in
awake.
your sweet
I'll
spot.
get there before I go to bed.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Hans Zimmer, again, the tickets from EtihadArena.com this weekend, 31st. I think that one was almost sold out, but June the 1st, there's some tickets available as well, and HansZimmerLive.com. It's been beyond an honour, you know, and thank you for being so giving, not of your time, but also of your stories, which
Yeah.
was
No.
really insightful for us.
Like so generous with
Trust
your
me,
stories.
I have a few stories.
I have a feeling there's a few more.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for being so delightful.
Dubai 92.